So it is official. We are getting a Spaceballs 2.
Lord help me, what?
And if you haven't seen it, there's already been a release of like a teaser trailer in classic Spaceballs format. You know, we got the opening crawl sequence with the blue font and even the music in the background. And again, just like the original Spaceballs, it's very long and just rambly and just complete nonsense, but it's done in just the perfect way to be hilarious. You know, this is 100% like you wouldn't even have to hear the music or even see the title of Spaceballs to not know that this is a trailer for Spaceballs.
Spaceballs?
In the opening sequence, it's just talking about how there's only been ever one Spaceballs, and you know, Star Wars is obviously expanded with TV shows. There's been prequels and sequels and even prequels to the sequels, yet there's only been one Spaceballs.
That's unfair.
And in this trailer, once again, we get just the classic Spaceball comedy, which is Mel Brooks right there wearing the shirt that says Spaceballs, the sweatshirt. I mean,
Hold the flamethrower! Bet kids love this one.
So obviously we don't get much from the opening sequence as far as what the story's about and whatnot, but it's just exciting to see that because actually we did get a confirmation for Spaceballs 2 last year, but really no information about it. Like we were told that there's going to be one, but I mean, I don't think we were getting our hopes up that high just because, you know, there's announcements for films all the time and then a few months later they get canceled. But now we actually have a teaser trailer. So I want to talk about what we know for sure is coming up in the Spaceballs 2 and also talk about and just kind of reminisce about the original Spaceballs. So first off, what we do know, I think the big question is the cast. You know, when we first heard about this last year, there was no confirmation of anything, you know, cast, you know, story, nothing like that. So we weren't sure if this was going to be a completely brand new thing or if they're going to be bringing back a bunch of the original characters. And I'm happy to say we are getting a huge handful of people coming back into this one. For example, we're going to be getting Mel Brooks. So there is a confirmation that he is coming back as Yogurt, but no confirmation if he's actually coming back as President Scroob, not for sure yet. But he actually directed the original film, and he's actually 98 years old now, so he's not directing the new one, but he is going to be having a huge part in helping this film happen. On top of that, we're also going to be getting Rick Moranis, classic 80s comedy film star, and he obviously doesn't do so much, so the fact that he's coming back to reprise his role as Lord Helmet, that's just going to be amazing to see.
I always have coffee when I watch Radar. You know that.
Of course I do, sir.
Everybody knows that.
Of course we do, sir.
And then on top of that, we're also going to be seeing the characters of Lone Star and Princess Vespa coming back, played by Bill Pullman and then Daphne Zuniga. And what's also really cool is Bill Pullman's son, Louis, is actually going to be playing their son in Spaceballs 2, so kind of keeping it in the family there. And at least for what I can see and the research I've done, there is no confirmation of Dot the Matrix, kind of the C-3PO type character coming back, but we are going to be getting two new cast members, that of Keke Palmer playing a character of Destiny. So this probably would be, I would assume, some type of droid character to kind of fill that role. And then Josh Gad, his role we do not know. There's really not much. He's actually co-writing the script too, and along with a bunch of other comedy writers. I think it's highly speculative that he's going to be playing the character of Barf, or at least maybe a Barf type character. Unfortunately, the original actor who played Barf, he passed away in 1994, just about 7 years after the release of Spaceballs. So obviously we will not be seeing him, but you know, maybe Josh Gad might be playing something like that, I would imagine. So some other stuff that we know is that it's basically planned to release in 2027. It's going to start filming later in this year of 2025. There is no, at least where I can tell, no official title for Spaceballs 2. Several years ago, back when they were trying to make it happen, there was a couple loose titles, that being of Spaceballs 2, The Search for Money, which I think if it would have come out at that time would have been a hilarious title, or there was another rumored title of Spaceballs 3, The Search of Spaceballs 2. I mean, it's just nonsense. But again, it's done in such a way that is just, it's a cult classic of the original Spaceballs.
How was that?
Not bad.
Not bad for a girl.
That was pretty good for Rambo.
But at the very end of the teaser trailer, for a split second, we do see a title there called SWHARTZ Awakens. So maybe this might be it, and it might be a little bit of a hint as to where the new franchise is going to be going. Or maybe I shouldn't say franchise, but the new film should be going. I mean, if that is, because that would obviously be off of Force Awakens, so they might be pulling in kind of like, you know, Rey and Finn characters. I don't know. but it's hard to say because again, the original Spaceballs definitely mimicked, A New Hope, but it obviously spun off and kind of did its own storyline a little bit too. So I don't know, like SWHARTZ Awakens. I mean, I could see them, kind of maybe compiling, the last movies 7, 8, and 9. One other thing I'm hoping to see, which I'm sure we will be the original like RV spaceship, which was called Eagle 5 in the original Spaceballs. I have no doubt that we're going to be seeing that. And the other thing I'm wondering is, how much are they going to rely on CGI compared to, puppetry or stuff like that? For example, some of Barf's costume was actually done by puppetry. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they're going to like really draw back from the original and those times, or are they really going to kind of pull it into the new era of CGI?
Oh no, not again.
And the one thing I will say about the teaser trailer is that it definitely looked as if it did come out, in 1987, which was the original release date for Spaceballs. So for me personally, I love the movie Spaceballs. It's just a fun way to poke fun at, your favorite. And that's the thing. Like, I think comedy should be that way in general. Like, you need to learn to laugh at yourself. For example, Mel Brooks, he went straight to George Lucas, the source, to ask permission to make this movie. And George gave him, 2 thumbs up. He even loved the film after it came out. You gotta learn to laugh at yourself. You gotta learn to laugh at your own projects. When somebody's playing a heartful, but comedic joke at your expense. And so that's what Spaceballs is. And honestly, Spaceballs reminds me a lot of the Scary Movie franchise. Make their own, like, comedic horror film, but they were playing off, spinning off, and joking about like the past horror movies from like the past 5 years. And that's what Spaceballs is, because there were so many callbacks towards it. For example, obviously the main one being Star Wars, and then Star Trek, Indiana Jones, Aliens, and then Planet of the Apes, Wizard of Oz. Like, they were wrapping all of the movies around that time and just making fun of it. And again, Star Wars being the main theme, but poking fun at all that stuff. So talking a little bit more, I want to talk about the original and what I'm hoping they will definitely pull from that and keep going into Spaceballs 2. Spaceballs came out in 1987, which was about 5 years after Return of the Jedi. So at that point, it had a lot of time to settle in, the Star Wars franchise. And then a big thing throughout the entire film was them breaking the fourth wall.
Everybody got that?
He did it.
This happened throughout the entire film, and obviously there was moments where they would actually look at the camera and talk to the camera and talk to the audience. Those are the more obvious ones. But then the obvious callbacks towards that they were in the middle of filming a movie. So there would be, every once in a while you would see a camera guy or a sound guy. So I'm really hoping we see that in this new film. I mean, I can't think of any comedy film within the last, 5-10 years. I mean, them breaking the fourth wall in a comedic way. I mean, I would say obviously probably the bigger one would be,
oh, hello. I know, right?
Deadpool. Deadpool breaks the fourth wall constantly. But other than that, I can't think of anything where that happens. So I highly expect that they will stick with this. If you imagine some low budget film to spin off or rip off of, Marvel or Star Wars, that's what Spaceballs is, but it's done in the ironic way, as in they know and they're obvious that they're stealing or ripping off Star Wars. But there is one moment where there actually is a part of Star Wars that is 100% in Spaceballs, and it's towards the end when they're at that little diner and it's zooming in on the outside of the building. You can actually see the Millennium Falcon parked right there. And I definitely think it does look a little off of the Millennium Falcon, but it is confirmed that yes, that is the Millennium Falcon parked at the diner. And then another obvious thing, other than breaking the fourth wall, the thing that I thought was so funny because they were doing it in such an obvious way, again, this is such a Mel Brooks thing, was the merchandising.
Merchandising!
So like I said earlier, Mel Brooks, he went straight to George Lucas, asked permission if he could make this film, and George Lucas gave him the thumbs up to do it, and he did honor that. And because of that, that's why throughout the entire film that they subtly put in products. I mean, there's the obvious one with yogurt where he's like, merchandising.
Spaceballs the t-shirt. Spaceballs the coloring book. Spaceballs the lunchbox.
And the toys, that's the obvious scene, but throughout the entire film, there's little subtle things of, merchandising. And that was just a huge play on joke of, Mel Brooks being like, all right, we can't sell any merchandise, but it doesn't mean we can't throw it all over the film we just can't sell it. And that's another part I'm hoping we'll see in the next film. I highly doubt they're going to get the rights to any type of merchandise in Spaceballs 2.
Welcome to real life.
And something else that's really fun from the original film is how, again, they are in the know that they are filming a movie, but, Lord Helmet wants to know when it's out, and they take the VHS tape, of course, no CDs at that time, but they take the VHS tape and they put it in, and they're literally watching the film as it's being filmed. And it's kind of cool because it was like they were honestly, in a way, kind of predicting, streaming nowadays about how fast movies are going, from production to, the theaters to in your home, on, at that time, VHS. And Spaceballs definitely is one of those movies where it's not for everybody. It's 100% cheesy.
No way! You forgot late charges.
And again, it's just like the Scary Movie franchise. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say you need to be in the know of Star Wars or of sci-fi movies in order to enjoy it, but it 100% makes the experience a lot more funny just for the fact of there's the obvious jokes, but then there's the subtle jokes where, again, if you hadn't seen Aliens or were familiar with Star Trek or Wizard of Oz or Indiana Jones and stuff like that, you wouldn't necessarily pick up all of the comedic jokes throughout Spaceballs. It's definitely a niche of a certain type of audience. I think if you are familiar with, sci-fi franchises, they mentioned in that opening crawl sequence about Jurassic Park, Marvel and Harry Potter and Avatar, for example, whether the joke is obvious or more subtle in Spaceballs 2, you're not going to get it. And so we still got quite a bit of time. Again, this isn't coming out till 2027. It's probably going to be at least, I would say, probably 2 years away. I could see it coming out maybe sometime during the summer of 2027. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. What do you think they're going to take, say, from the original Spaceballs and put into the new one as far as, breaking the fourth wall, the merchandising? I don't know. It's hard to say, like, are they going to play off an actual storyline of, say, Force Awakens, or are they just going to kind of make up their own storyline, but then, again, sprinkle in just, little bits of, like, the sequels for Star Wars? Let me know in the comments what you think. But again, we got 2 years to wait. So until then, may the SWHARTZ be with you.
May the SWHARTZ be with you.